Hi, Srinivasa.
Hi Rohit. Yeah, thanks for the nice
Yeah, hi.
introduction
Good morning.
and good morning.
Yeah, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
Awesome, awesome. So, uh, we are really glad to have you, Srinivasa, for JCloud Day conference, and we really appreciate you accepting and coming to the conference and sharing your knowledge. So, without wasting further time, Srinivasa, I would request you to give a short intro about yourself, like what you're doing and why are you so much interested in contributing to communities and community events, and what is your session is going to be today.
Yeah, sure, Rohit. I'm working in software industry for the last close to more than 23 years, and I like pretty hands-on development work. Currently working on the large data sets processing and using machine learning, artificial intelligence, and big data computing technologies like Spark and distributed computing. And my passion is always to share the learnings, whatever I know a bit of, so that it helps the community and it helps the other people. And nowadays, it's a wealth of information there in the internet. Okay, so
Yeah,
people has to allocate some time so that right everything is possible in this time. Okay, hope everyone is safe during this pandemic situation, and I really appreciate the people for taking time and allocating their valuable time to attend this conference, Rohit.
yeah, definitely we do. So, Srivan, would you like to share your screen so that I can present it and you can start?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Is my screen is visible, Rohit?
Uh, not not exactly. So, so in the bottom, you can find a button called share screen.
Yeah.
Yes, I can see that.
Okay. Is
Okay,
it loaded?
so yeah, so here you go.
Okay. Um, Thank you, everyone. Good morning. As indicated earlier, um, so I will be talking for the next 30 minutes and sharing my experiences on continuous performance engineering. So most of the times in most of the organizations, they have a practice for continuous integration and continuous deployment, but very few organizations follow continuous performance engineering aspects as well from the beginning of the project together. So a bit of myself. So I started in some small startups. So then I moved to HP. So there I worked as a middleware architect and got an experience in benchmarking and performance tuning of large data sets. Then later I moved to BA WebLogic. So that's where I got a hands-on experience and then architecting the performance benchmarks and working with spec groups. Okay, and got a reasonable experience in the performance industry and benchmark standards. So then I started an Interwoven as a development manager. So started building the production content management side and machine learning side. And before joining Visa, I spent 10 years in Cisco. So there I led few projects in customer experience, Cisco services, and innovation products using machine learning and artificial intelligence. And for the last 4 months, I'm working in Visa as a director, working on the data platforms. I'm proud to say that I'm one of the coach and mentor for an almost 100 engineers course from IIIT Madras and Upgrade, which is an advanced certification in machine learning and cloud. So I would like to bring up two issues. If you see that the relative cost of fixing defects found at different stages in software development lifecycle, this is a known thing as per the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, as per the NIST. If you are able to figure out, find a bug during requirements or during coding, it takes less cost, okay, less number of hours to fix the issue when compared to the same bug when it is found during post-production or during the production, okay. And then second issue is, this slide talks about the garbage collection, especially for the Java applications. Garbage collection takes a significant role. If your application is spending significant amount of time on garbage collection, so then it has a dependency, okay. So there is a large dependency on the throughput as well. There is a significant loss will be there in the throughput if the percentage of GCs increase. And then it's worst in case of multiprocessors. Take for example, if an application is spending 30% of the GC, and if you are getting a throughput of 1, then almost like the loss is 80% throughput loss on a multiprocessor system if the application is running on 30 CPUs, for example, okay. So this is what the benchmarks as per the Oracle Java Standard Edition 8 and 9 documentation. So in my view, every Java developer, every Java engineer, whether you are building the application on premises or in the cloud, should have a focus on the garbage collection as well. So how to address these two issues, okay? As I mentioned, so the one of the approach is implementing continuous performance engineering. So what is continuous performance engineering? Similar to continuous integration and continuous deployment, you start using performance engineering from the beginning of the application during the development itself. So you select a tool, application performance profiler, which has less overhead, so that you can run your unit tests along with your CI/CD pipeline and integrate this profiler as well, so that you will get the profiling recordings for the same unit test whatever you are running, okay. You have to enable some of the profiler options, and then you will get the profiling data as well. So you can baseline the application performance and compare the performance results for each pull request, assume if you are using a GitHub. So as one of the best practice is, so whenever a GitHub pull request is raised, compare the baseline performance data along with the updated new code performance data, okay. And then some of the things you can make as a checklist saying that, hey, the new code doesn't increase the socket IO or file IO, and similarly there is not much increase in the percentage of GC, or the CPU, memory, disk, network, some of the system resources utilization is not increased from previous build to the new build. If there is a proper reason, so then worse. But assume like if there is no, if you are fixed there in the new bug, so new code, so then you can reject the pull request itself. So this is one of the best practice people can start following it. So this is the slide I've taken from Azure Web Apps, how you can use Java CI/CD using Jenkins. So IntelliJ or Eclipse, and you develop the code and submit the code into GitHub. So then it triggers a Jenkins workflow. It builds a container from Azure Container Services, and then it gets a gets the artifacts from Azure file systems and then builds it like MySQL. So far, so good. So then you can monitor that application using Azure Application Insights as well to figure out some of the performance overheads, some of the performance counters, and Azure Application Insights supports the JMX as well, Java Management Extensions. So that also you can make use of to intercept and then instrument some of the code. With this, I would like to focus some aspects on Java garbage collection basics. In Java heap, if you see the blue color boxes, so these are the occupied objects in the Java heap. Okay, so when a garbage collection triggers, it marks the unused and unreferenced objects, so that you can say that they're in orange color. All blue color objects are live objects. So once a Java garbage collection marks these entries, hey, they are ready for garbage collected, and then in the second phase, it will delete these objects. Okay, so assume like all the orange objects, all unreferenced objects are deleted. So then the heap memory looks right, the gaps in the, it will not be a contiguous. So that's why then it will do the compacting as well after the deletion. So this is a bit of garbage collection introduction. That is the mark and sweep garbage collection. The next is I would like to focus more on the thread local allocation buffers. As you know, hotspot heap structure, and the heap, it is divided into two spaces. One is the young generation and the other one is the old generation. And the parent generation is for the JNI side. And the young generation is further divided into hidden space and two survivors. So whenever you create an object, that will be created in the hidden space. Then after the GCs, it survives from survivor 0 to survivor 1. Then it will move to the old generation. You can set the options for new generation size, and then what is the survivor ratio, or 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever, 1 to 10. You can specify that as well. So now what happens is, as a thread local allocation buffer, assume like your application has a lot of threads. Each thread has to create an object in the hidden space itself. Okay, in order to properly synchronize, JVM it creates a thread allocation buffers for each thread within the hidden space itself, so that that thread can create objects within the given TLAB itself. Okay, so it's pretty easy to synchronize within the JVM threads, and you can specify the TLAB size using the Java options, and then you can resize some of the TLAB options as well. But as I would cautious tell that don't play with this unless until you have a experience in that. Okay, don't try in the production, but you can try in the non-prod, and then later you can increase or decrease TLAB size. But most of the JVMs have adaptive TLAB size, so they will be able to adjust the TLAB size based on the number of threads, and then object sizes, etc., etc. So some more data on the TLABs. In the top side, if you see that the hidden space is created, and then when you start a new object, it has to create in the TLAB. But assume like the new object size is much larger than the available TLAB size. So in that case, what it has to do? So it has to create the new object outside the TLAB. Okay. So if whenever the TLAB size doesn't fit into the given, whenever the object size doesn't fit into the TLAB, so then it has to create in the hidden space outside the TLAB itself. So that is one scenario. The second scenario, so the application is creating too many objects. Okay, assume like one particular thread is creating too many objects. In that case, the TLAB size is full, almost full. And then the same thread, if it has to create a new object, than the available size, then it has to create the object in the hidden space, but outside the TLAB. So make sure that outside the TLAB, and as much as possible, all the much there is less impact. Play with that. The specify how much is the TLAB waste can be based on your application, but be cautious when you're playing with these TLAB sizes. Then there are garbage collectors available from JDK 1.2, 1.3 till 1.14 or 15, and these are all the traditional garbage collectors, the serial garbage collector. So this does the mark and sweep in a serial fashion. You can use serial GC option, and this is mainly if a large number of JVMs needs to be run in one particular server, so you can make use of the serial JC. In the parallel JC, as the name suggests, it does the mark and sweep in parallel. So you can specify the parallel JC option, and you can specify the number of parallel JC threads as well. So if our system has 32 processors, so you can use parallel JC threads as 32. And by default, if you don't specify any JVM option, JVM will pick up one of these options based on the number of CPUs available in the system. And the next one is the concurrent mark and sweep, the CMS collector. So this is basically a low pass garbage collector. So this is used for low latency applications. Okay. And the next traditional garbage collectors. There are the new garbage collectors, JDK 12 onwards. One is the G garbage collector. So you can specify the option using -XX plus use GGC. So this garbage collector beauty is on a single JVM heap, you can set up to 18 terabytes itself. Assume like the Java application which you are running requires terabytes of heap, and at the same time much less impact on the garbage collection. You can go with G garbage collector. And the next one is Shenandoah. So this is also like G garbage collector for large heap sizes, and it can run in 3 modes. One is normal mode, another one is experimental mode, the third one is passive mode. So normal mode happens mark mode, and in this marking mode similar to G1 GC. In case of IU, that experimental mode, this is basically the concurrent GC. And the third one is for diagnostic, right? In the passive mode. If you are using some functional testings, you can make use of Shenandoah with passive mode so that you will figure out and the stop the world garbage collection mode called C4. This is a commercial one, and this doesn't have any pause times. So that means during the garbage collection, it doesn't pause the application threads or JVM threads. So it's for very low latency applications, we can make use of Azure C4 as well. In fact, Azure supports the OpenJDK builds on Microsoft Azure, so people can make use of that as well. So as I mentioned, for the continuous performance engineering, we have to select a profiler. So the profiler should be less overhead. It should not cause more overhead. So one of my suggestion is to go with Java Flight Recorder. So Java Flight Recorder is a bit of history. So it started in BEA, that time it is used to call JRocket Runtime Analyzer. So I have used this during my BA days. So then BA is acquired by Oracle. So then they renamed that to Java Flight Recorder. And then later, the same code is given to open source. And then nowadays, the OpenJDK, JDK 11 onwards. Some of the vendors like Azul, Pivotal, so right, they support the OpenJDK builds, and then you can make use of from Azul, with they supports Java Flight Recorder. So Java Flight Recorder architecture, if you see that, your the Java Flight Recorder is built within the JVM itself. Okay, so you no need to have any additional jars in the class path. Okay, and then you no need to specify anything. And your application can make use of Java Flight Recorder if it is running in JDK 1.8 or 1.11. Okay, and you can specify some of the options saying that, hey, how long you want the recording. Suppose if you are running the unit tests run for 15 minutes, you can say that I want to record maybe first 5 minutes or last 5 minutes, or maybe the complete 15 minutes duration itself. That you can specify it. And there is a UI tool, Java Mission Controller. With that, you can analyze the recorded files. So this slide talk about the differences between the traditional sampler-based Java profilers versus flight recorder. The sampler-based profilers will make use of JVM tooling interface, and then they use the bytecode instrumentation. But whereas flight recorder is built in the JVM itself. Okay, as I mentioned, it doesn't require, there is no agent jar. Okay, typically the samplers will use java.lang.instrumentation package, and then they built the instrumentations using agent jar, and then that needs to be into the class path. So then that jar will make use of, right? They make use of JVM call get all state traces. So they have a potentially it encounter safe point bias. So what is the safe point bias? So whenever you make call to thread infos or stack infos, assume like there are three threads are in this particular application: thread 1, thread 2, thread 3. So in order to get the details, so you can request a safe point request. So thread 1 may be completed in one particular time interval, and then it can say that, hey, I am available. But thread 2 is doing some system.array copy and some of the calls. So then it has to wait. The T1 has to wait, right? And then T3 also can respond. So it takes some time for all the three threads, right, to come to the global safe point. That is a time to safe point. So this much time has to wait the thread 1. Right? It is a stop the world kind of thing. So there is an impact on the performance overhead in some of the traditional sampler profilers, which make use of get all stack traces. Whereas if you use a JDK flight recorder, which comes from the open source OpenJDK, now it is open source. It uses make use of the hotspot internal APIs, the safe point bias, okay, and then it can asynchronously stop the execution of the thread, and then at any point of time. So that's why I suggest to make use of the Java Flight Recorder for continuous performance engineering, or any profiler which supports async profiling option. So with the Java Flight Recorder, it can record the file IO, socket IO, method profiling. It can you can make use of it. You can take thread dumps. You should be able to figure out garbage collection and the thread local allocation buffers, as I mentioned. That also you should be able to see it, and then you can see the system resources, the number of threads, etc. And there are 5 different ways Java Flight Recorder can be used. One is, as I mentioned, that Java JVM argument. You can enable flight recorder -xx plus flight recorder, and then you can specify how long you want to run, and then what is the delay, and then what is the flight recording file name, and then where it has to do. And then there are 2 settings you can do. One is the profile, and then another one the default. In the next slide, I will talk about what is the difference that. And if you are using there is the one option. The second option is you can use the Java command exe, okay, the Java command program, and then you can specify the PID, and then you can use the jfr.start command, or you can use the Java management extensions APIs as well. And then you can use the Java Machine Controller as a tool which can do the live profiling of the application as well. Or if you are interested in API base, so you can use the Java API recording.start as well. So there are two modes. One is the default.jfc, and another one is a profile.jfc. So I recommend default.jfc can be used in the production as well, because that has a lower overhead, and then it collects the minimal information, which are good enough sometimes, right, to find out the root cause. But if during our performance test and then in the continuous performance engineering, use the profile.jfc. So this provides a lot more data, performance data, and then at the same time, it has some overhead when compared to default.jfc itself. And the JFR settings, these two files are available in the OpenJDK path and slip.jfr directory. You can edit, do whatever, which options you want to use it based on your profiling needs. You can change these files as well. So I would like to give an example of application which I want to show how continuous performance engineering helps. Assume like this particular application deployed in Azure. Okay, so there is basically homomorphic encryption. As you know that homomorphic encryption as per the Paylor crypto system. Okay, so you can encrypt a message. Okay, and there are two messages, assume like, and you can encrypt message 1 and then encrypt message 2, and multiply these two encrypted messages and take a mod of n is a large prime number, so that is your public key. So that is, and then you can decrypt it. So that is equivalent to the two messages which are not encrypted, the addition of the two messages and mod n. So these are the two properties of the homomorphic encryption. There are a bunch of others are there as a part of the fully homomorphic encryption. In Microsoft also supports a library open sourced it. So that is basically you can make use of a C++ code. Okay. In this slide, I have written a program which is a producer consumer kind of problem. In one particular one build, so the producer is sending two messages. Okay, assume like maybe 10 and 5. There are two numbers. So the two numbers, you are encrypting it and then sending to a consumer using a blocking queue. In this case, I'm using Java linked blocking queue, and I used there is no upper bound, so that since I've written in an infinite while loop, so the producer is keep on sending the two numbers. It takes two numbers and encrypts it and send to blocking queue. In the consumer side, what I'm doing is in the consumer side, what I'm doing is I am multiplying the encrypted messages, okay, and then decrypting it with mod n square, okay. Can you see the next screen, Rohit? Yeah, okay. So if you see that there are two builds, okay. In the first build, the producer threads sleep for 500 milliseconds before sending the next two messages, okay. In the consumer side, it processes the two encrypted messages and it multiplies that, okay, and then decrypts so that you will get the original two message addition itself, and then it sleeps for 300 milliseconds. But assume like in the second build, maybe one of the engineers saw that, hey, why the producer has to wait? Okay, let me change the timing of the producer wait time to 100 milliseconds. And similarly, okay, consumer needs to do a lot more since it is doing homomorphic encryption decryption part. Okay, let me increase the consumer thread sleep time to 500 milliseconds. Just these are the two lines of change. He did it, and then he submitted the pull request. assume like the first build we have the unit test, okay, and then we have the Java flight recorded options. What is the recorded file? And then second build also assume like we have the recorded file. So using Java flight recorder, like if you're using a Java machine controller, you take the live JVM and then you can specify how long the flight recording is to run, and then you can specify the recording option and all. So I used the Java machine controller and then generated the two mission recording files for the build 1 and build 2. So the first build, okay, if you see that Java there are kernels and all. And the next garbage collection comparisons. Okay, if you see that in the first build, it took just 3 milliseconds, some of the pauses. Okay, and in the second build, if you see that there are 4 GC events happened, and the sum of the GCs are 68 milliseconds. Okay, in the first build, only one GC event happened, and the sum of the garbage collection pause times is just 3 milliseconds. But whereas in the second, it took 68 milliseconds. So that means something is wrong with the second build code, right? The JVM is taking, the GC is taking more time. And if you see the thread local allocation buffers in the first build, there is 144 bytes are allocated outside the thread local allocation buffer. As I mentioned that for each thread, there is a TLAB size. But whereas in the second build, all threads are allocated within the TLAB itself. Okay, so this is where you can compare between the two builds. And then memory, right? The live objects. If you see in the first build, there are no live objects, okay, when the GC is happening. Pretty good. But whereas if you see that the memory size, it's keep on increasing it. Okay, keep on increasing. So that means after some point of time, definitely it may come to out of memory exception. And similarly, if you see the live objects count, okay, the live objects are more, and there are live, and then size is also more when compared to the first build. In the first build, you don't have any live objects, so that means there is no memory issue. But whereas in the second build, the memory usage is keep on increasing it. Eventually, it may end up in out of memory exception. Okay, so that is the problem with the slow consumer, whatever the settings he did it. And there are a bunch of VM operations. So this requires a little bit of experience. So, okay, since I'm running just for 5 minutes, so there is a GC heap inspection, the VM operation also triggered. But at this point of time, you guys no need to worry it. Okay, so with that, what we can say that the second build, when you compare these flight recording options, you can reject the build, saying that the second build basically is taking more garbage collection. Okay, the GC amount of time spent is more, and then live objects also increasing it. So you can, right, you can reject the pull request, and then submitter can change the code again and then submit it. So there are other ways of doing the Java flight recording as well. If you want to, if you don't want to use the GUI tools, if you want to make use of your own code, so you can. There are two classes are provided: Java flight recorder recording file and recording event. So you can make use of these these two classes and process the Java flight recorded file itself. Okay, so the JFR file .jfr file will be dumped. It's in megabytes, depends on the how long you are profiling it. So that file you can parse it and then make use of these two classes to get the meaningful data from that. Okay, or you can use the Java machine controller as the GUI itself. With the JDK 14 onwards, Java 14 onwards, there is a new mode is supported for the Java flight recording, so you can get the event streams as well. So apart from sending the data into the JFR recording file, it will send the event streaming, right? So that you should be able to listen to a Kafka or something like that. You can send these events to there, and then you can process, and then you can process the rest of the performance monitors as well. So as I mentioned that in Azure, the sample app which they provided with respect to integrating with the CI/CD and deploying in Azure cloud using Azure Web Apps, there are 3 places you can integrate Java Flight Recording. So one is with your favorite IDE, in this case IntelliJ. IntelliJ has options to integrate Java Flight Recorder. And then the second one is the application insights. So you can use application insights and then make use of the JMX and trigger Java Flight Recording as well. So that along with application insights provided by Azure, we should be able to get the JVM telemetry and application telemetry as well. And the other one is in the Azure Web Apps, whatever is deployed. So there you can make use of, if you're running in a Tomcat or a Spring, so you can make use of the command line options as well. So these are the 3 places. If you're using Azure Web Apps, you can integrate the Java Flight Recording option and analyze the recorded files. So with that, I would like to conclude. You always make use of the performance profiler with low overhead, okay, and integrate your unit tests early in the life cycle with the profiling things. And if you have a performance test, that is well and good, so that you will have a lot more data is available to analyze, okay, and baseline the application's performance data and compare with each pull request. And some of the checklists you can make sure that based on your organization's maturity and compare the snapshots of the 2 builds or 2 pull, right? And then only approve the code based on the once the application meets the required performance data, okay? So with that, I would like to conclude my talk. Thanks a lot. Thanks for taking time. And during this pandemic situation, hope everyone be safe at home and open up for the questions. Thanks again.
Uh,